If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what's the creepiest or most paranormal experience that has happened to you? My house growing up was a two-family with a pretty big basement. We lived on the top floor, and the basement was used as storage and as a laundry room. The basement was pretty terrifying. It was super dark, all the lights were in the center of the room, so you had to go into a completely pitch black room, reach your hand up and pull on a string to turn the light on. I don't think I ever went into the basement without a weapon of some sort. When I was 10, my mom left me a note to move the clothes in the wash to the dryer. So I went to the basement, picked up a wiffle ball bat and proceeded into total darkness. I've literally been preparing to turn that light on and see some kind of monster for years. I pull the string, take a step and look up to see a man. He was breathing heavily and looked disheveled. I completely froze. I'm literally shaking to a point that the wiffle bat is sliding out of my hand. Before I can do or say anything, I hear a gun being cocked and my father from behind me say, "If you take one step toward my son, I will blow your fucking head off." The man standing before me takes a few steps back, turns and runs out of the door that leads to the backyard. Night shift in a hospital. Went to the toilet, both cubicles empty, sat down to do the business and someone started crying in the next cubicle, bolted out of there, the other toilet was empty. Different night, soon after I started working on this particular ward. Sat at the bottom of the ward so me and another nurse could get a good view of everyone. Without looking up from her notes she said, "Footsteps are back again." I said, "What footsteps?" She just said to listen. Heard footsteps come from the top of the ward to where we were, then go back to the top end. She didn't even flinch, just said you get used to it. There were some other issues with that particular unit. Eventually a priest came to bless it, and crashed his car on the way home. It has been decommissioned now. There were rumors about my neighbor's house. That there are ghosts and whatever. It was sold few times, because of that. In around 2001 it was sold to family with kids and me and other neighbor kids were super happy. We made good friends with those kids and had few sleepovers at their place. Shit you not, someone would pull your blanket in the middle of the night, things would disappear, doors would slam shut, knocking on windows. We always thought it's one of bigger kids trying to scare us. One day we witnessed how a bowl full of apples moved from counter to floor and broke. There was no one, just me and this other kid that was next to me and had no chance to touch it. Last time I was there alone I didn't come back for a long time. It's small town so we wouldn't lock doors in daytime, I would just come straight in and ask for my friend. Sometimes they would all be in garden so I'd walk through house, shout my friend's name, if she wasn't there I'd go to garden. Door to my friend's room had this big glass in it so you could see straight in it. So this time house was empty, I walk right in, shout my friend's name, go straight to her room. I look through glass and there's no one. Alright, I'll go to garden. For some reason I tried to push the handle of the door, and it was like someone was holding it. If door is locked you can at least push handle down, but I couldn't at all. It was like someone was standing on their side of the door holding it. Remember, I could see through window, room and handle on other side. There was no one. I pushed hard and I heard this loud but kinda low, deep no. I nearly shit my pants, and I wanted to run away so bad but in my panic state I decided to go toward exit backwards and slowly and not take my eyes away from that door. As I was nearly exit, this door slowly started to open. I never ran that fast in my life. I've been in this house after that but never alone. When I was young, probably 8 or 9 years old, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend a sleepaway camp in the endless mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania. My 2 older brothers were there, too, but they were in cabins with others boys their age. The cabin I was in was, of course, the last one at the end of the camp, making us the likely first victims for any monsters, etc., that might slink out of the woods. When I sleep I have to have a pillow or else I invariably wake up in the middle of the night and it will take me a little while to get to sleep. Needless to say neither I nor my parents had remembered to pack a pillow so I would wake up every night at what seemed like 1 or 2 in the morning. I was intimidated by the darkness and the quiet at that time and was a scaredy cat which my brothers would exploit for their amusement by, say, slamming the door on me as I tried to come upstairs from our cellar family room. They would taunt me by telling me the bogeyman was going to get me and I would scream and beg to be let up. Such fun. The camp we went to had the expected plethora of ghost stories, legends and the like associated with the area that I was already on alert for a visit from Rodney Groon, found hung, the Iceman, medical condition required constant icing, melted when he didn't have enough, caused grass to turn yellow where he melted, and even a landlocked shark several hundred miles from its appropriate habitat. Anyway, one night at camp I woke up in the middle of the night and lay there quite still and a little uneasy, waiting to fall back asleep when I heard a noise outside. It sounded like something was shuffling through the tall grass behind our cabin. Whatever it was, it sounded huge and I could tell it was coming directly towards my side of the cabin. I could hear a deep sniffling and wheezing as the creature got closer and was petrified, too afraid to move a molecule or breathe, much less raise any type of alarm. Whatever it was outside came right to the wall where I laid and suddenly started loudly scratching at the side of the cabin where I laid. My heart was racing and the sound of the scratching was at least 6 feet off the ground and sounded like it was being made by something big and heavy and was accompanied by that same wheezing, guttural growling that sounded like something pissed or hungry or both. The scratching suddenly stopped and I could hear whatever it was walking away. I was laying on my back and could see outside a high window right by the door to the cabin. I knew that I looked out that window and saw anything I was going to lose my life, limbs, soul, or whatever, and I remained as stiff as a board and filled with dread for my upcoming demise for a long time. I don't know how long it took me to get to sleep, but eventually I did, and I'll never forget the feeling of relief when I went out and the sun was shining and morning at the camp was proceeding just like normal and I was going to live for at least a little while longer. Since that time I've often wondered what I heard that night and assume it was a black bear going down to the lake for a drink and felt like sharpening his nails or something like that. But now I've read enough stories about Wendigos that I wonder, too, if I may have dodged an ever worse demise than getting eaten. Bear or Wendigo, never been more frightened and hope to hell I never am. When I was a child, 10 or 11 years old, a friend of mine who was from a poorer part of town told me he was moving to a house in a nicer part of town. A few weeks later I asked him if he was still moving. He said no and that there was a problem with the house. Years later he told me what the problem was and why his family didn't buy it for a third of its value. He said the house was haunted and a priest had been there performing exorcisms. I still didn't pay much attention, although, as a 16-year-old, if I ever went for a run and I went past the house I'd always feel a bit nervous and I would speed up a little bit. The house was the last house in a row next to a wood. I never saw anything odd. Fast forward 25 years to the present day and I was sitting with a friend watching sports and his girlfriend started to tell me a tale. I was half listening but my ears pricked up a little bit when she went into the detail. Basically her friend had purchased a local house at a knockdown price but had left it after only a week to stay with her mom. One night the lady and her partner went to bed. 10 minutes later they could hear the television on at full volume downstairs. The man got up, turned the television off and went back to bed. 10 more minutes and the same thing happened. He went back downstairs but this time he unplugged it. Just as they were about to go to sleep the same thing happened again. Suspecting someone in the house the man ran down the stairs. Again, the television was on full volume, and plugged back in. A few other things happened that I can't remember but they left and never looked back. I told my friend's girlfriend without her prompting exactly where the house is. To this day I am very nervous about going anywhere near. Though it wasn't actually paranormal, it still scared the crap out of me. It was about 3 in the morning and I had just gotten off YouTube where I was watching a bunch of videos about the Mothman, who apparently has 2 massive eyes, important later. I then went to the toilet. I live in a small flat so the toilet is just down the hallway for me. As my mother was sleeping in the room next to me and I didn't want to wake her up I didn't turn any lights on, which is normal for me. When I finished and left the bathroom and decided I was a bit hungry and went to get a snack, also not unusual for me. The kitchen is literally 5 or 6 steps to the left of the bathroom. As I was slowly walking I thought to myself, imagine if there were 2 big red dots in the window, that would be funny. Then when I stepped into the kitchen and looked at the window there were 2 big red dots in the window. I jumped back and gasped rather loudly and tripped on the back of the kitchen door, and then fell with a loud bang. I got up immediately and the dots were still there. I quickly noticed that the dots were just a reflection and I felt quite stupid. I looked around for what was causing it and it was just the plugs for my fridge and boiler, since they are both quite important. They have special switches with exposed fuses with light up so you can see it, they're working properly, and they were red as the safety glass on them was colored red. I got my food then went to bed with a rather large bump on my head. I'm pretty sure I picked up a demon on my honeymoon, and my, now ex, felt the same. We went to the coast for a night and had a great time but stayed in a cheap, rundown motel. Decided last minute to stay a second night, but at a nice hotel that I used to go to with my mother all the time. We head over, rent a room, all is normal. Except, as soon as I open the door to that room, this feeling of dread and wrongness settles on me. There's no apparent cause so I try to shake it off and continue on with our day. That night, I have horrible nightmares about sexual assault, which is particularly upsetting because I had not yet begun to deal with my own. Then I wake up in the middle of the night feeling watched and also really needing to pee. I just know, though, that I absolutely should not close myself in the bathroom or lock the door. I turn on the bathroom light and that flickers the entire time I'm peeing and holding the door ajar. I finish up and wash my hands while being very, very sure not to look up in the mirror. Go back to bed and try to sleep, eventually do, but it wasn't restful. The next morning I tell my partner, who also had nightmares about the same thing and woke up in the middle of the night feeling watched. It's spooky, but we don't think about it too much and go home. That night, I went to the bar with my best friend. Looked across the room and saw my rapist standing there, smiling at me. Double take and he was gone. He lives a few hours away, so I wasn't sure why he'd be here. I went home shortly after. For the next week, I couldn't sleep very well. I sat on the edge of the bed that's tucked into the corner of the room, knees to my chest, anxious. I couldn't leave the house. I felt watched and unsafe. My partner is, kinda, Catholic, so gave me holy water and instructed me on a prayer for the Archangel Michael. Then left for a conference across the country. I put that holy water on the windowsills and doors and prayed over everyone, every night. It took some time, but eventually the feeling faded and I felt safe again. Never been back to that hotel though. Also got divorced because I don't think cheating is cool. Nothing. Like seriously. Nothing. I wish something would happen. I just want to ant some sign that there's an afterlife or aliens. The only thing that comes close is when my son was around 3 or 4. So the scene is that my husband was driving to pick me up. There is a long stretch of highway that is pretty dark and deserted around the time he was picking me up. There is a tiny airport off the highway, but you can sometimes see small planes taking off or landing, but not the actual runway. Anyway, he calls me in a panic and is legit crying. I get off work and he tells me he got ran off the road by a pickup because he swerved to miss something that ran across the highway. It was just him and the other guy on the road. The guy asked him what it was, and both were like, who knows, but it was fast. The pickup left and my husband asked my son if he was okay, but when he looked back he said he saw a gray man at my son's window. Like an alien. Tall, gray, the whole 9 yards. He sped off all the way to my work and then called me crying, thinking that this thing was so fast, it would chase him and steal my son or kill them both. I of course don't to this day believe him. However, a few weeks later my son is drawing with sidewalk chalk and draws a semicircle and said it's the gray man's car. Which of course, could have been placed in his head by my husband. Final note. Later that night he was sitting on our recliner that broke and flew backwards and he screamed. He said, I swear I thought that gray man was sucking me through the wall, I almost died. So when I was 12 years old, one of the neighbor girls brought a Ouija board out to the green electrical box we, 2 cousins, 3 neighbors, my sister and I, would hang out at. We were all girls ranging from 11 to 15 years old. It was nighttime in spring of 1993. We started out by asking the usual, are you here? Then the planchette moved to yes and we all giggled and accused each other of moving the thing. We all denied it and continued by asking if any boys liked us. Then of course the owner of the board thought it would be fun to ask at what age she was going to die. Don't recall the answer to that, but then some of the skeptical girls thought we should ask for a sign. Our ringleader was my cousin, who we will call Regina George, and she's the one who was brazen enough to ask for a sign. So there we all were waiting in the dark. Looking up at the sky for an owl, or looking around for a shadow or something. When nothing happened, we began to relax and laugh at our own foolishness and gullibility. Then Regina George's mom calls out in the dark, we scramble to hide the board. Regina, your grandmother is calling for you, she says as she crosses the driveway and hands Regina the cordless phone over the gate. Now my cousins and I look at each other because our grandmother is not a warm, loving person. She only sees us on Sundays after Mass and never ever calls or visits us. Regina grabs the phone and cheerily says, hi Grandma, how are? Oh, I am fine. Her face falls and the enthusiasm is gone. No Grandma, really I am fine. Oh no, okay, bye. She looks up at us and the color is gone from her face. She looks over her shoulder uneasily and tells us my grandma said that a few minutes ago, she and Grandpa were watching their favorite telenovela, when they heard an enormous crash. When they got up to see what the sound was, they noticed that my quinceañera picture frame was on the ground. It was like if someone took it off the hook and gently placed it on the floor leaning against the wall. It wasn't broken or damaged. Grandma and Grandpa couldn't explain the crashing sound, so they thought it was a sign that something bad happened to me. She got worried and called to check up on me. We all said our goodbyes and scurried inside. We were scared. After that, I've never played I use that term very loosely because it is not a game, that shit is real, with a Ouija board again. 20 plus years later, I still have a lot of questions. How could our sign manifest itself 3 miles away? Why did it choose our grandmother's house? I have a theory about that. What was it we played with? Did that impact our lives in ways we don't even know? We were all pretty crazy adolescents, experimented with sex and drugs. I went on a camping trip with my dad and a couple uncles. My half-sister was along too. We were going to meet up with a bunch of guys and their families from my uncle's military unit. My dad went on ahead us while we chilled and went at a more sedate pace. My uncles are pretty cool, but they are hardcore campers/survivalists. So they suggested we take a more scenic route through some woods. It was kind of off the planned route, and my sister and I had a lot of fun as my uncles were messing around with walkies and pretending to scout places. Campfires were fun and more relaxed with drinks than when my dad was around, and my uncles told some pretty good stories. Things started getting weird though. My uncles one day stopped joking around and actually started taking proper looks around. They wouldn't tell us why. But I guess that something had spooked them. My sister is better at the tracking stuff, and she started noticing things weren't right. That someone was following us. Then we started seeing things carved in the trees ahead. Meaningless symbols. I confronted my uncles. They told me they had a feeling that they were watched when they first entered the woods, but kept quiet as there wasn't any evidence. They told me that the evidence they found was off, too obvious. The man that was watching us could have concealed himself much easier than he did, but he didn't want to. He was trying to make us take a different route, as my uncles would alter course depending on the signs of him being there. I originally thought this might be an elaborate joke, but I saw something in their eyes that changed my mind. That's when we started seeing him. At a distance. Through the trees. My uncles didn't chase him, as they didn't want to leave us alone. They shouted at him, pointed a gun at him. He didn't care. He just stared at us. He looked like a wildman, ragged clothes and a lot of hair. He would watch us from a distance for a bit, then just walk out of sight. My uncles were convinced he was letting himself be seen on purpose. It seemed as though he was either trying to warn us away from something, or hurt us towards something. My uncles took turns taking a watch at night. No more jokes. On edge. Gun out. Told us to use our whistles if he got too close and gave us knives if he got really close. It was a really dark night, all of us around the fire but looking into the trees, and we heard him speak. His voice haunts me. Why? Because it was strangely normal. Completely civil, almost smooth. Not the kind you would expect from, as my uncles called him, the wildman. He said good evening. Nearly pissed myself. The voice was really close. My uncles went quiet as they started looking for where they thought he was. My sister was the first to speak. She said, "Who are you? What do you want?" It was quiet for a while. Then even closer from a different direction. Interesting questions. I'm afraid I don't really want to answer them. I caught a glimpse of him. He was smiling. I shouted and pointed, and my uncle took a shot. He moved away. One of my uncles chased after him with a torch and gun whilst the other stayed with us. He didn't catch him. None of us slept that night. We took a different route, coming into a clearing with a largish body of water. He was on the other side. He waved. Then disappeared back into the woods. Then we saw what he wanted us to see. A campsite. But it was a wreck. It looked trashed. My uncles reckoned it wasn't more than a few days old. One of the sleeping bags was soaked in blood, the other was ripped like someone had been dragged out of it. There was human hair as well, torn out. With clumps of skin on. It was too much for me and my sister. We found the others a day later. The police and rangers were called. The two missing were thought to be a young newlywed couple. There was a search. My uncles and their military buddies actually went and searched the woods before the police and rangers. Nobody found anything. Just weird things carved into the trees. But the symbols were just gibberish. They literally had no known meaning. My sister never went camping again, and I still have nightmares about it. There's an old hotel in Columbus, that my husband worked at as a night auditor. It was haunted. Pretty much all the employees and security guards knew it. The manager let me and my husband prowl around, just so I could get a feel for the place. Maybe get some names, that sort of thing. I got to know some of the resident spirits, but there was this void. People-sized. I'd almost say it was a shadow person, but it wasn't that. It felt like it was a person hiding. Fearful. There were rumors that a woman was killed by her partner one Valentine's night. I thought it was just a story, since, old hotel, ghosts. And then the manager wanted me to go to the room, to see what could be done to make it usable for guests. It was real. The room had been locked off. No actual door or key to get in, but if you had to, you could jimmy the lock with a knife or something. My husband did the honors, and in we went. The door was kept open as the room no longer had lights. The flashlights on our phones illuminated what the hallway lights couldn't, a honeymoon suite covered in blood. The bed's mattress had been cut, presumably for evidence. There were blood splatters on the wall next to the bed in an arc I'll never forget. I got close up to them, and had the urge to touch them. I didn't. Next to the bed was a jacuzzi, more blood. There was a bloody handprint there, too. Between the jacuzzi and the wall was the tiny hallway leading to the bathroom. Vastly larger amounts of blood here. Another blood spatter, the little ottoman drenched in dried blood. In the bathroom proper is where it had pooled. Over the sink, in the tub, on the toilet. It was horrific. I advised that they completely redo the place. It needed to be brought down to the studs, and cleansed and blessed, likely a few times. It was oppressively heavy there. I didn't get the feeling like it was an actual person hanging around the room, but so much anger and vitriol and fear there that it stayed with me for a few weeks. I felt like if other people stayed there and it wasn't cleansed and blessed, they would have a hard time staying there, and not in the cool haunted hotel way. In time, and with more visits to the hotel, I sort of got the feeling that the void was likely the woman traumatized, in pain and traumatized. Before the redo could happen, the hotel was closed down for mundane reasons, and the property was abandoned. There was a fire in one of the rooms where vagrants had tried to stay warm, and if you're looking in the right place, you can find a video an urban explorer made of the place. It's now a giant U-Haul. I once had a very weird sleep paralysis. I already had 3 of them ATM, so was used to the thing, but I literally called my mom at 4 a.m. after that happened. So I was having a weird dream and it ended with me climbing on a roof of a little shack surrounded by wolves. Suddenly I feel that something pulls me up, like I'm levitating or don't know. I wake up in my room. For a moment it seems like I had a nightmare or something, then I open my eyes and see a something. It was a she, floats over me, and looks like a banshee. Google it. I can't move or even breathe, quite normal sleep paralysis so far. So I understand what's going on and kinda relax as I already had this kind of experience. I decide to calm down and wait until I wake up completely, but then its face just grows about 3 times and starts screaming, like in horror movies when there is no eyes, only black dots and sharp teeth. I feel scared, but the worst part was next. I understood that I am not asleep, but paralyzed, and that thing is pulling me out of my body. Like it felt like exorcism, but vice versa. I felt like I am dying and thought it's now or never. Somehow managed to resist it, finally was able to move my hand, move on my left side, and I fell asleep a moment later. I woke up some time later and realized that I was in a position I fell asleep after I moved my hand. Couldn't sleep for 5 hours then, called mom from another country, but fell asleep at 9 a.m. I regularly visit forest lawn mortuaries. This stems from being a kid of a single mom until I was about 8. They're extremely huge and have several museums on their property, in CA. After my great-grandmother died, she was buried here. I like having picnics by myself and walking around reading everyone's epitaphs, sometimes commenting out loud or even talking to them. Yeah, I'm a weirdo. Anyways, one day, the week prior to me moving up to Northern Cali, I stopped and picnicked as usual near my great-grandmother's grave. As I said my goodbyes, I was compelled to check out graves on the other side of the street that sat on a rather steep hill. I paid my respects and also asked for forgiveness for what I was about to do. I laid down and rolled down the hill like a little kid. Like I said, it was rather steep. I then laughed to myself, thanked the spirits, pardoned myself, cleaned up and headed to my car. As I approached my car, I heard my car doors lock automatically. I typically left it unlocked as I'm usually the only one around and I was sitting less than 5 feet away from it. I figured that the button simply got pressed, being in my jeans pocket. I pulled out my fob, pressed the button to unlock the door, it unlocks, but then as I reach for the door handle, it locks again. I chuckle a bit, say out loud, okay, very funny. I've gotta go now though. It's been fun. I repeat my actions again. However, this time I see a flash of several older people standing behind me in my car window. I look behind me, nothing. I look around, down the street in both directions, hear nothing, see nothing and no one. I then put my fob on the top of the car, and back away while holding my hands up, saying out loud, I've no more time to play, I've really gotta. I'll come back and visit when I can, I promise. Just let me leave now please. Thanks. At this point, my car is still locked, with my fob sitting on the car. I walked around the car to the curb and sat down. By this point I'm starting to freak out a bit, so I apologize for rolling over whomever's grave and sorry for offending them with my childish act. Suddenly I hear my car doors unlock. I jumped up, yelled thanks, bye, and got TF out of there as fast I could. I've gone back to visit every time I'm in town, and I make sure to visit all the graves on the opposite side of the street and greet them every time. I've had far creepier experiences, but this one popped in my head first because it happened on Halloween. I was on candy duty, and the latest we've ever had trick-or-treaters come was like 9:45 p.m. I can't remember if that happened that same year or not. But it was a rainy Halloween night. 10 p.m. comes along, and at that point I figured we'd get no more trick-or-treaters, so I'm doing some chores and watching TV. Sometime after 10 p.m., I suddenly hear 4 knocks on what sounded like a window from the back. I got confused because usually I could see if a car pulled in the driveway, headlights shining, etc., and I didn't see anyone pull in. I'm in a somewhat rural area, so usually the trick-or-treaters are driven by their parents house to house. And not only did that confuse me, but why would someone knock on a back window/door? I looked at the driveway and saw no car, but I grabbed the candy dish anyway and I checked all the doors, no one was there. I looked out the windows to see if maybe a prankster was lurking around, which would have been a first for us, but still didn't see anyone. And if it was a prankster, why would they do that in the rain? Usually people don't like the rain. So unless they ran fast or they hid somewhere, there was no one there. I'll add that I have a game camera too that doubles up as a security camera if there's a trespasser, which has happened, and it didn't capture anything that night, but maybe they didn't cross the path of the camera. So it could have been a prankster, but I'm leaning towards not. Okay. I was in 8th grade at the time. I used to give Dad company during my holiday and visit his office. He used to work, still does, at a telecommunications company, operation and maintenance. Ours was a tiny town, named Baruch. So, the office is a small one, with an equipment room, 2 huge DCs, an office house to accommodate 20 to 50 ppl, single-storied, everything. It was just beside a national highway. So, on bike, we would take a U-turn and then had to park the vehicle outside those small inns, and then walk through a trail of woods to get to the office would take about 4 to 8 minutes. In front of the office lives an old couple, in a hut-like structure, with their grandchildren often visiting them. Beside their tiny bit, some 10 meters ahead, is a huge cottage, 3-storied, abandoned, and not in good shape. More on that later. So, I used to watch some stupid show about ghost hunting on AXN. They showed how to communicate with any such entities. How to make them aware of your presence. To introduce yourself, speaking out your name and your purpose, that your intention is just TK, find out if someone's there and nothing else. Then, you would have to proceed doing something, for example igniting a candle and asking it to be put down if it's there. You get the idea. I don't believe these stuffs. So, it's broad daylight. Scorching heat. Probably 2 or 4 p.m. I'm listening songs on my Nokia 5235. I randomly walk over this cottage. Its main door is shut with those iron bars, and locked. You could see what's inside, that is. So, you could see 3 doors, 1 on each side and 1 in front. Now, these rooms' interior could be viewed through the window panels across the elevation, that is, front view. Sorry, I'm a civil engineer. Anyways, I casually look inside the window glass. Burnt newspapers, stuck across the walls. The ceiling all orange colored, rusting of those rods. I realize I should try what I had watched. So, I introduce myself and do all those aforementioned stuffs. I repeat myself once again. Nothing. So, now I decide to bang the windows hard and ask if anyone present could do that to confirm its presence. I bang hard. Probably twice or thrice. So, my position right now is, I'm outside one of the windows of the locked door towards right, if facing the whole house. I hear 3 loud bangs on the opposite side of the building, from the other window across the door, just to my left. I was shocked. I tried to rationalize things. First thing I utter is, it's alright. I mean no harm. I shall be leaving now. I stand a few yards away, gathering courage, trying to think of the possibilities. I think, animals. There must be an animal, probably some stupid bird which might have coincidentally hit the glass. So, I go towards the left side window. It's broad daylight, with the office guard just a call away. I'm least bit scared. Disturbed? Yes. So, I look inside. Nothing. I could see the left door, those rusty bars up the ceiling. Nothing else. I decide to do this again. This time, I would make sure someone isn't pranking me. I repeat the same procedure, saying those same stuffs. And again, performing the same action. 3 loud bangs, and then ask it do that. And just as I finish my sentence, me continuously looking on my left, 3 loud bangs. This time, I couldn't resist. I make a run for it. Checking, if some fucker from the woods is fooling around, throwing stones or some shit. I look outside the building. Nothing. Now, I decide to bring those kids I mentioned before. 4 to 5 of them, I tell them I saw something crazy. Come on, let me show you guys. One of those girls knows me well. So we walk again. I tell them the procedure I follow to do this. I tell them don't be scared. Even if you are, don't show that. Something that TV show mentioned. I introduce these kids. And repeat the same thing again. And there it was. Bangs heard again. Those kids, in awe or shock, looking at me. I tell them now come on. Check it out. Is there a single thing inside? They are amazed. Now you decide to tell this to our guard. So, all of us went to him. I told Sonu Baya meaning Big Brother, something strange happened to us. Please come and check. So, I tell him everything that has happened until now. I repeat the same procedure in front of him. This time, no bang. Nothing. I repeat again and again. Nothing. I could sense that he's probably thinking we kids are making this shit up. And so I say Baya, seriously. I'm not lying. Really. This thing happened. You could ask any of these kids. That's it. Sorry if this wasn't worth your read. I do TK how to make things interesting to read. Just wanted to share this weird thing. If you've got any questions about the house or anything whatsoever, feel free to ask me. Smile. His reply was these things are real. I trust you, my name. These things often target kids, vulnerable ones. Come on inside now. Don't go near this building, okay? You kids too. Don't roam around here. Used to work midnight shift as a corrections officer in a low security detention center that only houses women now, but years before it was an actual prison with men. This is a facility with 12 pods, each housing 40 individuals. There are 2 posts whenever you are assigned to the pods. Rover, you have to move around 3 pods that are at one end of a hallway, and picket, center of 3 pods where you can see through barred out windows and cameras on a computer monitor. One night as the rover officer was doing their hourly rounds to make sure the inmates were asleep and in their rooms, the picket officer saw through the monitor what seemed to be the silhouette of a man following the rover. This black shadow would follow the officer to the end of the room, and when they had to go up the stairs to 2nd floor, it crawled up the wall and went to the 2nd floor. The picket officer told the captain on shift what they saw, and when they reviewed it on the tape they saw everything that had happened. This black silhouette has been spotted several times by different officers, and it only appears in this one specific pod. It was way before my time working here, but apparently it's supposed to be the ghost or whatever of some guy that hung himself from the 2nd floor railing. I used to work in a shop in Old Town, San Diego. A lot of the places there are famously haunted. I, myself, am a mixture of skeptic and believer, so I'll provide both stories, first with the one I can explain. So, at night we closed up and locked the front door while one employee counted the till and the other cleaned/straightened the store. After that was done, the lights had to be turned off. Well, the lights were controlled by a junction box of sorts in the middle of the store. Most of the girls were terrified to turn off the lights, because they claimed they would hear footsteps following them on the other side of the 6 feet tall bookshelves. I'm no scaredy cat, so I'd usually be the one to do it. But then I started to hear these footsteps, too. The explanation? Well, this building is old, and so is the flooring. It's long pieces, stretching the entire width of the store, which meant that as I put pressure on my side, I would hear the wood creak on the other side. Phew. No spooky ghost. But, wait, there's more. Now the front of the store is sectioned off from the back by a chain, and the flooring is different in the back, it's carpet. In the very back is a door that is locked during store hours. The owners have a key and would come and go randomly. One day, I hear and see the back door open and shut. I'm tall enough to see all the way to the back from the front, and saw the light from the back door. Thinking it's my bosses, I go back to ask what's up. Except, there's no one back there. I check the 3 other rooms and broom closet. Nothing. I check the door. Locked from the inside. I poke my head out. No one around. I have no explanation. There were also random times when I would see/hear someone shuffling around back there, assume it was a lost customer, and go back, only to discover nobody back there. It only gets worse. As I said, at night we clean. Which means vacuuming. The vacuum is very loud in this building. That night I was counting the till while my coworker cleaned. She's a very skeptical person who hates ghost stories. We both hear very, very loud knocking, heard it over the vacuum, throughout the whole building. The logistical problem with this is that the building is about 8 feet of brick in height, then 3 feet of wood to the ceiling. It's also completely detached from any other building. No one was at the front, glass panes, or back door. She comes back after vacuuming and I say, "Did you hear that?" To which she responds, "Oh, God. I was hoping you wouldn't say that." Then the penultimate story of mine, there is an end, I promise, I was in the back doing inventory. Now, more context. The storeroom door is very large, 6 feet-ish, and very wide. We typically leave it open, as it takes force to open and shut. The floor is also at a slight slope, so to shut the door, you have to dislodge it from the carpet, it gets stuck, and tug it uphill. I'm heading to the storeroom, when the door, with exuberant force slams in my face. Uphill, against carpet, with enough force to blow wind about me. No, there is no way to form a vacuum with it, the wall for it stops shy of the ceiling. So, I simply told whatever it was to never do that again. That's when my story stopped. I still have no explanation for everything that happened there. When I was a kid, I was big into hunting paranormal stuff with my friends. I had 2 friends who I would investigate with. Let's call them Jerry and Petra. One day, Jerry tells me about something that happened to him. He had made a makeshift Ouija board, and he ended up contacting a ghost named A. We were all curious, and wanted to know more about this ghost. And having the most items for safe spirit contact, we decided we'd use my Ouija board to contact A again. We set up a salt circle, candles, and lavender around the board before we start. We didn't have any sage, we start the session, and things immediately go wrong. We all get a feeling of something watching us. Something evil. It's not A. We ask who it was, and the ghost responded with T. We asked what it was. It responded with proxy. Looking up a definition, we learned that he was a proxy for someone else who wanted contact, and it wasn't A. It was something much darker, but we didn't know what. Suddenly, we hear a loud bang coming from a closet. Jerry and Petra leave to check. I stay behind, not wanting to take my fingers off the planchette and accidentally end the session without saying goodbye. They both come running back screaming. Petra says that they saw a black figure with tiny white eyes sitting on the floor in fetal position, staring right at them. We all freak out and end the session. We go upstairs to get holy water, and when we come back, the planchette, which had been taken off the board, was now back on the board, and all our protective stuff had been thrown everywhere. The candles were out, thankfully. Subsequent sessions reveal that A comes in darkness and T comes in light. So we'd always keep the lights off whenever we had a session. But what was chilling was that we learned that T was trying to drain our essence, and A was trying to protect us. We also learned T is specifically targeting Jerry and Petra. They shared a last name, but weren't directly related, but he'd somehow gotten tethered to both of them. We all saw the black figure a few more times. It showed up standing outside our houses, looking in our windows from the street. We also saw a white figure with black eyes watching us several times. We presumed that it was A. I also got persistent feelings of dread whenever I entered the basement closet. Eventually, we get the house smudged and the sightings stop. I haven't used a Ouija board since. I was at summer camp in Georgia. I had been there for about a week and was going to go home in a day or so. I woke up sometime late at night and had to use the restroom. We were in perma tents and my cot was in the middle, since we all pushed our beds together because cockroaches would crawl up the walls. I was trying to be quiet but I accidentally bumped my friend and she woke up. Normally we were supposed to take a buddy to the restroom at night and she offered, but I told her I'd be alright. I grabbed my big industrial flashlight and walked across camp to where the latrine was. It was put back into the woods a bit so we couldn't smell it. The latrine plus shower thing had a dim light in it, so I set my flashlight down on concrete outside the door. Then I went to the restroom, but while I was in there I heard a sound like a twig snapping and I figured it was my friend or someone else needing the latrine, so I was like, hello. Nobody answered, so I assumed it was an animal like an armadillo or something. So I finished up in the restroom and looked out on the steps for my flashlight. It was gone. I checked in the grass and all around, but it was gone. I was thinking about just making a run through the dark back to my bed, but I was scared. Then I heard something and looked around and saw something shiny in the grass like 30 feet away, so I walked towards it and away from camp and the latrine to the edge of where the brush had never been touched and reached down and picked up my flashlight, but it was wrapped in a fabric. I turned on the flashlight and to my horror it was the tank top I'd worn that day and my towel, but they were ripped and caked in mud like they'd been dragged through the nearby marsh. Then I felt around in the grass some more and found my stationery box and pencil with no stationery. I was so scared at that point my heart was thumping, so I dropped all but my flashlight and sprinted back towards my tent, and about halfway there I almost ran into my friend. She looked as I felt. She told me I'd been gone for 45 minutes, she had a digital watch. And looked at me bewildered. I told her what I thought I saw, and me and her walked back to the latrine while she calmed me down. When we got there the latrine light was off, I left it on when I ran, and my tank top, towel and stationery box and pencil were gone from where I dropped them. She told me I should clean off at the spigot, so I walked over and looked in the mirror hanging on the latrine and I was covered in dirt, and my face and my blonde hair looked almost brown. I had no idea how I got so muddy since I was perfectly clean when I left the tent. Then she walked me back to the tent after I cleaned up. It still makes my skin crawl, and I never did find my towel, tank top or stationery stuff.